Hello HFY fans, welcome to Outer World. If you like the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a like. This may mean nothing to you, but helps us a ton. Without further ado, let's start with today's story. The barren, rocky surface of Corvus 9 stretched out endlessly under a pale, dying sun. Dust storms whipped across the jagged landscape, and the ground itself was a twisted mess of cracked stone and sun-baked craters. It was the kind of place even the toughest soldiers hated, a wasteland with nowhere to hide. General Tharik of the Zathari Dominion stared at the holographic projection of the battlefield, his angular blue scales shimmering under the command deck's dim lighting. His violet eyes narrowed as he watched the tiny human platoons scattered across the moon's surface. They were cornered, trapped, and thoroughly outnumbered. He allowed himself a smug smile, his needle-like teeth glinting. "Foolish creatures," he hissed. "They've chosen to make their stand on an exposed rock. No cover, no fortifications, and no escape. This will be a quick extermination." His second-in-command, Lieutenant Carr, adjusted the targeting matrix and glanced at the general. "Shall we order the hunter drones to deploy and finish them off?" Tharik waved a dismissive claw. "Let them sweat. Send the shock troopers to flush them out. I want to see them run for their lives before we cut them down." As the shock troopers deployed from dropships, their heavy boots thudding against the cracked ground, the humans didn't move. They remained eerily still, positioned around the base of a jagged ridge that overlooked a narrow canyon. Lieutenant Carr frowned. "Why aren't they moving? Surely they know they're surrounded." The general scoffed. "Primitive fear. They're paralyzed. I expected more from these so-called Deathworlders." But something wasn't right. One of the drones hovering near the canyon's edge suddenly exploded, sending a spray of metal fragments across the rocks. The troopers halted, raising their energy rifles. Another explosion followed, this time below the ridge, blowing a narrow ledge to dust. Carr's mandibles clicked nervously. Explosives. But how? "We didn't detect any weapon caches on the moon's surface." General Tharik waved it off. "Desperate attempts to slow us down. Push forward. They can't hold that position for long." The shock troopers advanced in disciplined ranks, energy rifles raised, but the ground beneath their feet suddenly shifted. A loud crack echoed through the canyon as the stone floor collapsed, revealing a hastily dug pitfall lined with sharpened metal scraps, salvaged from abandoned mining equipment. Several troopers tumbled into the trap, impaling themselves on jagged spikes. The survivors pulled back, trying to regroup, but another explosion sent shards of molten rock hurtling through the air, cutting through armor like paper. Panic started to ripple through the formation. From the safety of his command center, Tharik clenched his claws. How did they manage to prepare defenses so quickly? This moon was scanned and cleared. There was nothing here. Carr hesitated before replying. "They must have used the mining equipment left behind by the original settlers. They've repurposed the terrain." Tharik sneered. "Improvised defenses? Child's play. Crush them." As the Zathari forces funneled into the narrow canyon, chasing the retreating human squad, a series of controlled detonations erupted along the cliff face. Massive boulders tumbled down, crushing troopers and blocking the path forward. Some of the trapped soldiers tried to climb the rocks, only to be hit by booby-trapped explosives rigged to detonate on contact. Tharik watched the chaos unfold, disbelief spreading across his angular features. "They're not running," he muttered, realization dawning. "They're leading us." Carr looked at the general with uncertainty. "Sir, should we withdraw and regroup? Our forces are taking heavy losses." Tharik growled, refusing to accept that his elite soldiers were being bested by a ragtag human platoon. "No, surround the canyon and flush them out. They can't keep this up indefinitely." But as more Zathari reinforcements pushed forward, the humans vanished into the shadows of the canyon. A brief moment of silence settled, and then the canyon itself seemed to erupt with fire. Detonations rocked the landscape, and the canyon walls began to crumble inward, burying Zathari troops under tons of rubble. Tharik's fists trembled as he stared at the holographic feed, his arrogance crumbling like the rocks burying his soldiers. "They're using the terrain itself as a weapon," he whispered, voice thick with disbelief. "They didn't just fortify their position. They turned the entire canyon into a death trap." Lieutenant Carr lowered his head. "General, reports indicate that the humans are using old mining charges, deliberately collapsing sections of the ridge. They must have studied the terrain before the engagement." Tharik finally understood. Humans didn't just adapt to hostile environments, they embraced them. Every rock, every crevice, every abandoned machine became a tool of destruction. They had no need for superior firepower because the ground itself fought on their behalf. With a cold shiver running down his spine, Tharik muttered to himself, "They don't need weapons. The ground itself fights for them." The command deck of the Razor's Edge was tense, the air thick with disbelief and frustration. General Tharik couldn't look away from the holographic feed, his jaw tight and his violet eyes narrowed. The once mighty Zathari shock troopers were reduced to scattered survivors, desperately trying to pull themselves out from under the debris of what was once a strategic canyon pass. Lieutenant Carr hesitated, his mandibles clicking nervously. "General, the troops are reporting heavy casualties. At least 60% of the forward unit has been lost, and the recon squads are encountering more improvised traps in the surrounding areas." Tharik clenched his claws, struggling to process the absurdity. "How many humans remain?" Carr adjusted the display, highlighting scattered heat signatures on the surface. "Approximately 12, sir, but they're constantly moving, using the terrain to mask their positions. It's like they're everywhere at once." Tharik glared at the display. "How do a handful of humans manage to cripple an entire battalion? Are they using camouflage tech? Cloaking devices?" Carr shook his head. "No, sir. It appears they're simply using the terrain, setting traps, digging trenches, using abandoned mining equipment to create choke points. They're using the landscape itself as a weapon." The general didn't respond, too consumed with rage to acknowledge the ingenious strategy. He slammed his fist onto the console, sending a ripple of static through the holo display. "Send in the drone swarm. I want the entire area saturated with firepower. No more of these primitive games." On the moon's surface, Captain Eric Dawson wiped the sweat from his brow and checked his comms. His squad was scattered across the ridge, but they were calm, coordinated, and disciplined. A low crackle signaled Sergeant Riley on the line. "Cap, the canyon's sealed off. We got at least 3 dozen troopers trapped in there. They're not going anywhere," Riley reported, his voice muffled by static. Dawson grinned, his teeth flashing under the dusty helmet visor. "Good work. We've still got eyes on the eastern approach?" "Affirmative. Corporal Hendricks has the long-range scanner rigged to the old mining beacon. They're sending in drones, but they're coming in hot and heavy. I think they're getting desperate." Dawson glanced at the jagged rocks where his squad was concealed. "Let 'em come. We've got toys for them." He moved to where Private Sanchez was setting up a jury-rigged rocket launcher, made from an old mining plasma drill. The young soldier gave a thumbs up, his face smeared with moon dust and grease. "Think it'll hold?" Dawson asked. Sanchez smirked. "Hold? This baby's gonna light up the sky." The Zathari drone swarm surged forward, hundreds of sleek, insectoid machines buzzing through the thin atmosphere. Equipped with energy lances and tracking sensors, they homed in on every heat signature and movement pattern they could detect. Dawson pulled out his datapad, tapping into the remote detonator grid. "All right, boys. Let's show them what happens when you step on a human lawn." With a quick flick of his thumb, the ground around the approaching drones erupted in controlled explosions. Massive dust plumes shot into the sky, forcing the drones to veer off course. As they scattered, a series of rock slides triggered by hidden explosives crashed down from the canyon walls, smashing drones and blocking the paths forward. From the high ground, Corporal Hendricks activated the old mining laser, sweeping it through the air and catching clusters of drones in a scorching beam of energy. Those that avoided the laser flew into a dense cloud of metallic chaff, clogging their sensors and causing them to collide mid-air. In the chaos, Sanchez fired the makeshift rocket launcher, sending a blazing plasma bolt right into the drone formation. The explosion was like a miniature supernova, vaporizing dozens of drones and scattering the survivors. Back on the razor's edge, Tharik watched the feed in stunned disbelief. The drone formation was collapsing, their movements erratic and confused. Reports indicated that heat sensors were scrambled, targeting systems were malfunctioning, and the terrain itself seemed to betray their approach. Carr's mandibles clicked with uncertainty. "General, our forces are reporting hostile terrain conditions. The humans appear to have mined the entire area, and our drones are falling into disarray." Tharik slammed his fist down, frustration gnawing at his insides. "How is this possible? They're primitive, under-equipped, cornered." Carr hesitated. "Sir, they've been turning the environment against us. Every rock, every abandoned structure. It's all part of their defensive strategy." Tharik's claws scraped across the metal railing, his anger giving way to a sickening realization. They don't need fortifications, because they make them out of nothing. They don't just use the environment, they become the environment. Captain Dawson regrouped with his squad at the designated fallback point, a narrow ravine where they had positioned homemade spike traps and rigged the overhanging boulders to collapse on command. He crouched next to Sergeant Riley, peering through a cracked scope. "Think they'll try pushing through again?" Riley snorted. "They're too proud to admit they've been outplayed. Bet they'll double down and charge straight through." Dawson grinned, slapping Riley on the shoulder. "Good, let 'em come. We've got a whole moon to work with." Suddenly, Hendrix's voice crackled through the comms. "Cap, the Zathari commander is broadcasting something. You gotta hear this." Dawson activated the frequency, and Tharik's voice came through, strained and bitter. "This is General Tharik of the Zathari Dominion. You honorless cowards have disgraced the battlefield with your trickery and sabotage. Face us openly if you dare." Dawson couldn't help but laugh. "They want honorable combat, on a dusty rock with no cover. Sorry, pal, that's not how humans play." Riley grinned. "They thought they could just walk all over us. Let's make sure they regret that." On the razor's edge, Tharik watched as his remaining forces fell back, their morale shattered. He knew then that it wasn't just about tactics or technology. It was about mindset. Humans didn't just fight a battle, they made the battlefield fight for them. The general let out a slow, shuddering breath, his pride crushed by the revelation. "They don't need weapons," he whispered, his voice hollow with defeat. "The ground itself fights for them." General Tharik stood motionless on the command deck of the Razor's Edge, his scales tinged with a sickly pallor. Reports kept pouring in. His once proud shock troopers were scattering like insects, overwhelmed not by superior firepower, but by the sheer unpredictability of the battlefield. Lieutenant Carr approached cautiously, not daring to meet the general's gaze. "General, Spare me your excuses," Tharik hissed. "Tell me what we're dealing with." Carr hesitated. "Sir, the humans have rigged almost every rock formation and canyon pass with explosives and traps. Our forces can't advance without triggering detonations or collapsing terrain. They're moving through tunnels, using natural cover, and even setting up ambushes. It's like the moon itself is fighting back." Tharik turned, his face a mask of frustration. "Send in the flame troopers. Burn out every tunnel and cave system. Leave nothing for them to hide behind." Carr hesitated again. "Sir, the flame troopers report that the tunnels are already compromised. They're encountering improvised gas pockets, methane leaks rigged to explode when ignited. We've lost 3 squads to firebomb chain reactions." The general's claws dug into the console, his pride bruised and his mind racing. How could humans take a bare, desolate moon and turn it into a fortress of death? Captain Eric Dawson and his squad crouched low in a rocky trench, watching the Zathari forces regroup at the mouth of the canyon. Corporal Hendrix adjusted the scanner feed, frowning at the shifting movement patterns. "They're changing tactics," Hendrix muttered. "Looks like they're burning the tunnels, trying to flush us out." Dawson chuckled. "Good. Let 'em light the fires. That'll just make our gas pockets go off and take half their forces with it." Sergeant Riley snorted. "Smart move, really. Can't fight us directly, so they're just trying to scorch the earth. Too bad the ground itself is booby-trapped. Private Sanchez adjusted his jury-rigged rocket launcher, still streaked with dust and grease. Wish they'd just get it over with. My trigger finger's getting itchy. Dawson smirked. They're still underestimating us. They think we're just buying time. Let's make 'em pay for that assumption. Prepare the Banshee protocol. Hendricks raised an eyebrow. That's a bit overkill, Cap. Dawson's eyes gleamed with confidence. They want to flush us out? Fine. Let's give 'em something to be afraid of. As the flame troopers moved through the outer tunnels, they began to notice strange vibrations in the air, low, haunting wails that echoed through the rocks. At first, they thought it was just air pressure changes, but then the sound grew louder, more piercing, like a ghostly scream crawling into their minds. One trooper hesitated, his weapon trembling in his claws. What? What is that noise? Another soldier's mandibles clicked nervously. I don't know, but it's getting louder. It's like the whole moon is screaming. Suddenly, massive explosions erupted from the canyon floor, sending dust and debris skyward. The vibrations intensified, causing shattered rock formations to collapse, burying the flame troopers in an avalanche of rubble. Back on the razor's edge, Tharik listened to the transmissions, his scales paling with every report. Sir, Carr said in a hushed voice, the soldiers are reporting disorientation and hallucinations. They claim the ground itself is howling at them. Tharik snarled, forcing himself to think rationally. This has to be acoustic warfare, some kind of sonic disruption. Humans are known for using psychological tactics. Find the source and neutralize it. As Carr relayed the orders, another explosion rocked the forward camp, and dozens of Zathari soldiers went tumbling from their positions. The ground continued to moan and wail, as if the moon itself was crying out in agony. Tharik couldn't suppress a shiver. They're turning the entire moon into a living nightmare. How can they manipulate the ground and sound itself? Dawson adjusted the resonance amplifier they had rigged from old mining machinery, amplifying the Banshee protocol's acoustic vibrations. The sound waves caused natural gas pockets to vibrate and ignite, creating chaotic explosions that spread through the underground networks. They're panicking, Hendricks observed, grinning as he monitored the enemy transmissions. Half their troops think the moon's haunted. Dawson gave a grim smile. It's all about controlling perception. They're militaristic, used to domination through force. Make the terrain itself seem hostile, and they lose their nerve. Sergeant Riley glanced up at the ridge. We've got incoming. Their command unit is trying to get eyes on us. Think they're getting desperate. Dawson nodded. Good. We'll let 'em see just enough to think they've got us cornered, and then we'll hit 'em with the cyclone detonator. Rig the canyon mouth with pressure charges. We're about to sink this whole damn section. Tharik was running out of options. His pride was bleeding out alongside his elite soldiers, and the moon itself seemed to be rejecting their presence. Finally, he ordered the remaining command squads to advance, determined to crush the human position. Just as they moved through the clearing near the ridge, the ground began to shift and crack, and the eerie wails intensified. Suddenly, the entire ridge seemed to detonate, sending massive rock slides cascading down and smashing into the advancing troops. Tharik's legs gave out as he stared at the horrific scene, his forces crushed and buried, the moon itself seemingly complicit in his defeat. They don't need weapons, he whispered, his mind shattered by the reality unfolding before him. The ground itself fights for them. As the survivors retreated, Captain Dawson watched from the high ground, the remaining human squad gathering around him. Riley gave a low whistle. They're falling back, Riley said. Guess they finally got the memo. Dawson nodded, taking a swig from his canteen. The Dominion thinks they can dominate anywhere. They forgot one thing. We're from Earth. Surviving hellscapes is what we do. He activated his comms, sending a message to command. This is Platoon Alpha. Hostiles are in retreat. Moon is secured. No casualties. Mission complete. As the Zathari ships vanished into orbit, the human squad relaxed, knowing that once again they had proven that no environment is truly hostile when humans are around. The galactic networks erupted with news of the Zathari defeat on Corvus 9. Battle recordings from both human and Zathari perspectives were broadcast across every major communications channel, showing the horrific ingenuity of how a barren wasteland became an unassailable death trap. General Tharik had been forced to file an official retreat report, his disgrace hanging over him like a suffocating fog. The Kraith Dominion, once feared for its brutal efficiency, was now the subject of mockery and derision among countless star systems. In the Galactic Council Hall, representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss the shocking news. On a holographic display at the center, a recording of the battle played, showing Zathari forces falling into traps, getting buried under rock slides, and facing explosions from gas pockets ignited by human sabotage. Ambassador Valera of the Relani Confederacy couldn't contain her amazement. Humans truly are Deathworlders. They transformed a lifeless rock into a nightmare battlefield in a matter of hours. War Chief Vornak of the Grunash Union gave a booming laugh. A mere dozen humans defeated a force of hundreds. They made the ground itself fight their enemies. Truly, they are warriors of legend. At the back of the hall, diplomat Zavik of the Zaltan Empire grimaced, his elongated face twisted in frustration. This is no mere cleverness. It is madness. No rational being would dare to fight in such a way. They are reckless and deranged. The Relani ambassador shot him a piercing glance. And yet they won. Your forces would have perished just as easily. The Galactic Council leader, an ancient being with glowing tendrils and shimmering eyes, finally spoke. We must accept the reality. Humans are not to be underestimated. Their ability to adapt and weaponize their surroundings defies all conventional logic. We must reevaluate our strategic doctrines to account for their creativity. Back on the razor's edge, General Tharik was sitting alone in his private quarters, his head in his hands. The transmission from Supreme Overlord Kravak had been brief and scathing, a demand for an explanation and a promise of demotion. His career, no, his entire legacy, was in shambles. Lieutenant Carr entered cautiously, offering a hesitant salute. Sir, reports indicate that the humans are broadcasting their victory. They've uploaded footage of the traps and environmental tactics to the galactic network. Tharik raised his head slowly, his face a mask of resigned fury. And how are the other factions reacting? Carr hesitated. Many are amused. Some are expressing admiration. The Grunash and Relani have openly praised humanity's ingenuity. Even the Virex Hive issued a statement acknowledging the tactical brilliance of utilizing natural terrain. The Dominion's reputation has taken a severe blow. The general gritted his teeth. They're laughing at us, aren't they? Carr nodded reluctantly. Yes, sir. The phrase, they don't need weapons, the ground itself fights for them, has become a popular slogan among civilian networks. Even our own people are discussing it. Tharik's claws scraped the metal surface of his desk. All because of a handful of humans. They've shattered the image of our invincibility. Back on Corvus 9, the human squad was gathering supplies from the wreckage of Zathari dropships. The atmosphere was light-hearted, filled with banter and laughter. Sergeant Riley leaned against a smashed drone, sipping from his canteen. Never thought I'd see a Zathari shock trooper scream like a toddler when the ground started howling at him. Corporal Hendricks smirked. They thought they could just march in and take over, didn't expect the whole damn moon to fight back. Captain Dawson grinned as he examined a recovered energy rifle. If they want to try again, they're welcome. We've still got half the ridge wired to blow. Let 'em dig through the rubble and find out the hard way. Private Sanchez poked at a charred helmet with his boot. Think they're finally getting the message. Earth's not just a death world, we're the masters of death. Dawson nodded, his face serious despite the humor. It's not just about beating them down. It's about sending a message. You don't get to underestimate humanity and walk away unscathed. In the wake of the battle, the galaxy began to truly grasp the terrifying potential of human warfare. The idea that humans could turn any environment into a lethal weapon left military strategists scrambling to re-evaluate their invasion protocols. Across countless worlds, military academies began incorporating human conflict strategies into their training, emphasizing the danger of underestimating terrain adaptation. Simulations designed to mimic human tactics left trainees demoralized and exhausted. One prominent analyst from the Cyrix Coalition issued a public statement. Humanity doesn't need fortresses. They don't need overwhelming firepower. They simply need space to think. Give them time to analyze the terrain, and they'll weaponize reality itself. No other species has shown such a fluid and creative approach to combat. We must rethink our entire doctrinal philosophy if we are to survive any future conflicts with Earth. At the United Earth Command, Captain Dawson's report had been met with wide approval. Commander Elise Markham, his superior, sent him a secure message. "Dawson," Markham's voice crackled over the comm, "heard you turned a dusty hellhole into a fortress. Nicely done. You made a lot of high-ranking aliens lose their nerve." Dawson shrugged. "Wasn't hard, Commander. Just had to think like an overconfident bastard. Figure out where they'd feel safe, then make sure it wasn't." Markham laughed. "They're calling it the Moon of Screams now. Can't say I blame them. You set a new standard for creative defense." Dawson smirked. "All in a day's work. Let me know if they want a rematch." The news of humanity's victory on Corvus 9 spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Videos of explosions, collapsing ridges, and Zathari soldiers running in terror played on countless screens, accompanied by captions like, "When Deathworlders turned the moon into a battlefield." "The ground fights for them." "Humans weaponize an entire moon. What's next?" The galactic community was divided. Some factions viewed the humans with awe and respect, acknowledging their strategic genius and unwavering adaptability. Others were horrified, seeing them as a new existential threat, creatures capable of turning hostile environments into perfect killing grounds. Back on the razor's edge, General Tharik was alone in his quarters, his pride crushed under the weight of his defeat. The Supreme Overlord's message had been swift and brutal: demotion to a garrison post, stripped of his rank and honors. His claws scraped against the metallic table as he stared at the debriefing reports, unable to accept the reality. Lieutenant Carr cautiously approached the doorway, his mandibles clicking nervously. "Sir, the High Command has dispatched Admiral Vekar to take control of the fleet. Your orders are to return to Krath space for reassignment." Tharik didn't look up. "They're sending Vekar to take my place?" "Yes, sir. The Galactic Council has issued a statement condemning our aggressive actions against Earth. They're also requesting a formal inquiry into the tactics used on Corvus 9. Many factions are questioning why we targeted an isolated human platoon in the first place." Tharik's fists clenched, his pride burning with humiliation. "We underestimated them, treated them like primitive savages, and they turned our arrogance into a weapon against us." Carr lowered his head. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" A weary nod. "Granted." The lieutenant took a deep breath. "Perhaps it wasn't just the tactics that beat us. Humans don't just fight, they outthink. They don't see a barren landscape, they see opportunity. They don't just survive, they thrive in chaos. We've always believed dominance comes from superior force, but humans prove that cunning and resourcefulness are far deadlier." For the first time, Tharik allowed himself to consider the truth. "You're right. I was blinded by our tradition of conquest. I failed to realize that true warriors adapt. They don't just fight harder, they fight smarter." In the weeks that followed, military academies across the galaxy began rewriting their strategy manuals. Simulation drills were adapted to include Deathworlder scenarios, where trainees were forced to navigate environments rigged with traps and hazards. On the Grunash homeworld, War Chief Vornak addressed his warriors in the Grand Hall. "The humans showed us that even a desolate wasteland can become a fortress. We must learn from them, study the land, respect it, and turn it to our advantage. From this day forward, our training will include environmental manipulation and terrain adaptation. The Virex hive, fascinated by the concept of acoustic warfare and vibration-based traps, began developing resonance weaponry, inspired by the Banshee Protocol. The Hive Queen herself declared that Earth's tactical genius should be analyzed and integrated into their swarm defense doctrines. Even the Rilani Confederacy, known for their advanced stealth technology, admired how the humans had managed to disappear within plain sight, using shadows and rock formations to blend seamlessly with the environment. They began developing new cloaking patterns inspired by natural camouflage techniques. Back on Corvus 9, Captain Eric Dawson and his squad were finally being extracted, boarding a dropship sent by the United Earth Command. As the craft lifted off, Dawson peered out at the dusty wasteland, a hint of pride in his eyes. Sergeant Riley sat beside him, grinning. "So, think they'll remember this little dust-up?" Dawson laughed. "Oh, they'll remember. I'm betting Corvus 9 becomes a cautionary tale for any idiot who thinks they can corner humans. They'll probably slap a "Do Not Engage" label on every rocky moon from now on." Corporal Hendricks adjusted his rifle, his smirk unbroken. "Never thought I'd see a whole alien army lose their minds because the ground was screaming at them." Sanchez laughed. "You think they'll ever come back for a rematch?" Dawson shrugged. "Doubt it. Word's already spreading that Earth's not just a death world. It's the place that trains the galaxy's craziest survivors. They'll think twice before cornering another human squad." The Galactic Council, still grappling with the implications of the Corvus 9 incident, issued a formal declaration. From this day forward, hostile engagements with Earth-based military units will be considered an extreme risk. All member factions are advised to exercise caution when confronting human forces. Their ability to adapt and weaponize hostile environments has proven unprecedented and unparalleled. Proceed with extreme caution. In the United Earth Command Center, Commander Elise Markham reviewed the final after-action report. The Galactic Council's declaration had arrived, and it was already causing ripples throughout the military hierarchy. She sent a message to Captain Dawson, who was back on Earth for debriefing and rest. Message from Commander Markham. "Congrats on turning Corvus 9 into a living nightmare for the Zathari. High Command's impressed. You've proven that Earth doesn't just fight with guns and ships. We turn reality itself against the enemy. Good work, Captain. Rest up. You've earned it." Dawson grinned at the message, leaning back on his bunk. He knew that Corvus 9 wasn't just a battle. It was a statement, a declaration that humanity wasn't just another galactic power to be pushed around. They were Deathworlders, and they would never be outmatched, because even the harshest environments could be molded into their greatest weapon.